Good afternoon, evil, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. When Nathaniel Gray inherited his great-uncle's decaying Victorian estate in the woods outside Dunswich Hollow, he thought it might be a stroke of luck. The old man had died without heirs, and Nathaniel, unemployed and freshly evicted, saw it as a second chance. Or maybe a haunted house adventure. He was the skeptical type. He didn't expect the clock. It stood alone in the center of the drawing room, a towering monolith of carved black oak, twice his height and etched with grotesque, writhing figures. Their faces twisted in agony, arms stretched in supplication toward the obsidian clock face. There were no numbers. No hands, save one, long, crimson, and trembling like a living vein. The moment Nathaniel stepped into the house, the hand began to move. 00:13:23:54:17. 13 days. 23 hours. 54 minutes. 17 seconds. At first, he assumed it was decorative. An odd old artifact from his uncle's eccentric collection. After all, the man had been obsessed with the occult, filling shelves with yellowed grimoires and dead-eyed taxidermy. But something about the clock unsettled him. It didn't tick like a normal mechanism, it pulsed. Each tock was a throb, like a heartbeat with a pulse of iron and cold breath. And it didn't count forward. It counted down. By the second night, Nathaniel had trouble sleeping. The ticking infected his dreams. He wandered through endless corridors of the house, chased by a sound that grew louder with every step. The ticking became thunder, then screaming metal, and finally a voice whispering from the walls, "Time is not yours anymore." He awoke with a nosebleed and a foul taste in his mouth. The air stank of rust. 00:11:02:45:13. 2 days had vanished. Just gone. He checked the kitchen clock, his watch, his phone. None matched. None kept time anymore. Even the battery-operated digital clock in the bathroom now blinked nonsense. The countdown ruled everything. Panic took root. He scoured the house, hoping to find a clue. Anything to explain this surreal madness. He found it in the study, behind a row of crumbling books on Victorian burial practices. A journal bound in cracking red leather. His great-uncle's final ramblings. The clock eats. It chooses. When it begins to count, your death has already happened, it is just waiting to arrive. It feeds on certainty. On inevitability. When it hits 0, it opens the gate. The final page was a smeared scrawl of ink and blood. Don't try to break it. It wants you to try. By day 5, Nathaniel was losing his mind. The ticking was inside his skull now. No matter where he went in the house, cellar, attic, even the shower, he heard it. Constant. Beckoning. His reflection grew unfamiliar. Pale. Hollow-eyed. His lips cracked from dehydration. His hair thinned overnight. He began seeing things. First it was shadows that moved against the light. Then flickers in mirrors, people behind him that weren't there when he turned. One afternoon, he passed the parlor and saw a woman in an old morning dress sitting beside the cold fireplace. Her skin was translucent, gray, stretched taut across her bones. Her eyes were sunken and weeping something black. When he entered the room, she was gone. Only a wet imprint remained on the armchair. 00:06:00:12:01. 6 days. He attempted to leave. Drove down the long gravel road toward town, but Dunswich Hollow was abandoned. Houses with doors left open. Meals still steaming on tables. Cars left running. But not a single soul. He tried the police. The line crackled. A voice answered, not in English. Not in any language he knew. A guttural chorus of whispers layered over each other, saying one word again and again. Tick. He found an old book in the town library, an unlisted volume wrapped in rotting parchment. The Chronophage, on entities that feed on time. The text was handwritten in Latin, French, and English, as though the author had lost their grasp on reality halfway through. It spoke of parasitic clocks, chronophages, that select a host and devour their temporal certainty. Time is not fixed, it claimed. It is fluid, and the clock drinks from the cracks in its fabric. The moment you see it ticking, it has already claimed you. To destroy it is to complete the ritual. When the host expires, the gate opens. The clock is not the end, it is the birth canal. He vomited in the alley behind the library. The trees above him twisted into nooses. The shadows had too many eyes. 00:01:03:44:59. 1 day. The house bled. Not metaphorically, actual rivulets of thick, red liquid seeped from the walls. The air became thick with rot and whispering. Electrical devices sparked and died. The light bulbs burst one by one. Every night, footsteps above him, slow, dragging, and guttural breathing from empty rooms. He boarded up the drawing room. He locked himself in the attic. He tried prayers, salt circles, iron nails, but nothing held the evil at bay. The dreams became prophecies. He saw himself laid out before the clock, eyes stitched open, lips sewn shut with black wire. All around him, tall things in robes of hair and bone watched silently, breathing as one. He awoke with cuts on his lips and black residue on his pillow. Desperate, he took an axe from the shed, stormed into the drawing room. The clock stood, ticking faster than ever, hand twitching so violently it blurred. As he raised the axe, the floor groaned, split. Dozens of hands burst from beneath, bone-white, fingernails sharp as needles. They wrapped around his legs, his arms, his chest. They pulled. He screamed, kicked, bit. With a final swing, he hurled the axe into the clock's face. The world exploded in sound. Shattering glass, screaming wood. A final, monstrous chime that knocked the breath from his lungs. Then silence. The hands were gone. The house stilled. The clock lay shattered. 1,000 pieces scattered across the floor. The countdown face was cracked, unmoving. Nathaniel fell to his knees, sobbing, laughing, alive. He staggered to the sink, drank water, took a shower, cleaned the blood from his arms. For the first time in days, he thought he'd won. Until midnight, when the house creaked again. Slowly, reverently, he returned to the drawing room. The pieces of the clock were moving. They twitched, slithered, crawled toward one another like insects. The wood reformed. The black face pulled itself back together. The red hand reappeared, twitching into place. Tick. 00:00:00:30:03. 30 minutes. He was out of time. The clock had reassembled itself with horrifying precision. The wood groaned and cracked as though the very structure of the house was buckling under its presence. Each gear, each splintered piece, seemed to shift with a life of its own, sliding together in agonizing slowness. The red hand resumed its pulse, ticking forward relentlessly, its tip a single vivid thread of blood that sliced through the air. 00:00:00:30:03. 30 minutes. Nathaniel staggered back, his breath catching in his throat, his heart hammering in his chest. He didn't know what terrified him more. The fact that the clock had reformed, or that it was counting down again, faster this time, like a predator preparing to strike. The room grew colder. The air became dense, almost unbreathable, as if the house itself was exhaling its last breath. Shadows in the corners of the room began to twist and wriggle, their shapes becoming more defined, more monstrous. They moved like smoke, but with a fluidity that suggested something much more sinister was taking form. Nathaniel's hands trembled as he clutched the edges of the doorframe. His mind raced. What could he do? He had already tried to destroy the clock. He had already tried to flee, but nothing worked. Nothing stopped it. The walls of the house seemed to pulse in time with the clock, the floor beneath him vibrating. A distant, whispering voice began to hum through the air, low, guttural, like something speaking directly into his mind. It was in a language he couldn't understand, but it didn't matter. The meaning was clear. It was coming. The house shifted. The wood groaned. The very structure seemed to bend, as though the foundations were breaking down under the pressure of something monstrous rising beneath. 00:00:00:00:12:02. 12 minutes. Nathaniel bolted from the room, heart pounding in his chest. He raced to the front door, flinging it open. But the moment he stepped outside, he froze. The night sky had turned a sickly shade of green. The trees, once familiar, were now twisted and deformed, their branches clawing toward the heavens like skeletal hands. The ground beneath him rippled, as though the earth itself was being pulled inward by an invisible force. But it wasn't the sky or the earth that stopped him. It was the things. There were figures in the distance, tall, skeletal beings, their bodies wrapped in dark, tattered robes. Their heads were covered by hoods, but their eyes, Two black voids glowed with an unnatural light. They moved toward him, their feet not touching the ground, their long, gangly limbs swaying with an eerie, unnatural rhythm. Nathaniel couldn't move. His legs felt like stone. His throat constricted as he watched them approach, his breath shallow and frantic. He tried to scream, but the sound caught in his chest. They were coming for him. The figures didn't speak, but their presence spoke volumes. Their gaze seemed to pierce him, reaching deep into his soul, as though they were pulling apart the very fabric of his being. 00:00:00:05:10. 5 minutes. The clock's ticking became deafening now, drowning out everything else. It was no longer a sound. It was a presence, a weight. It pressed on Nathaniel's chest, crushing the air from his lungs. One of the figures stepped forward, its face emerging from beneath the hood. It was not a face at all, but a black void, a gaping maw. Inside, something shifted, something that churned and slithered, its jagged teeth glowing white-hot. The figure extended a skeletal hand toward him, its fingers long and spindly. Nathaniel finally found his voice. "No," he whispered, stumbling backward. "No, please." But the figure's hand continued its advance, the air around it warping like a mirage. It reached for his chest, its fingers brushing his skin. The instant it touched him, the world around him cracked open. The ground beneath him split wide open, as though the earth itself were tearing apart. The black figures began to converge on him, their eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. The pain was sudden, excruciating, as though every atom in his body was being pulled apart, stretched across infinity. He screamed. The ground gave way entirely, and Nathaniel plummeted. He fell through a void, through layers of darkness and cold, deeper and deeper. Time seemed to lose meaning here. The sensation of falling stretched out forever. The space around him was tight, suffocating, as if the very air had become thick with the weight of his fear. Then a snap. He landed on cold stone, the impact sending shockwaves through his body. He gasped for breath, his mind swimming in confusion, his limbs heavy with exhaustion. His body ached as though every bone had been broken and reset. But he was alive. He looked around, blinking in the dark. He was in a vast, cavernous space. The walls were made of black stone, slick with a viscous liquid that dripped from the ceiling in slow, steady drops. The air reeked of rot and decay. In the center of the room, the clock stood, looming impossibly large, its red hand still ticking, now faster than ever. 00:00:00:00:01. 1 second. Nathaniel's eyes widened as the final tick resonated through the air, reverberating deep into his skull. The room began to tremble. The walls started to bleed. From the cracks in the stone, something began to emerge, something large. The shape was indistinct at first, but it grew larger with each passing second. A dark mass, thrashing and squirming, covered in shifting shadows. The air around it crackled with an unnatural energy. Nathaniel's heart raced. His mind screamed for him to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. His body was paralyzed, his muscles locked in place as if some invisible force was holding him captive. The clock ticked once more, and then the world tore open. A gate, a rift, larger than anything he had ever seen, split the air itself. It was an abyss, black and endless, swirling with ancient energies and roiling shadows. Out of it something emerged. A creature. No creatures. Countless forms, so twisted and formless that even the sight of them sent his mind into chaos. There were limbs that reached for him, eyes that blinked in places they shouldn't, mouths full of teeth that were not meant for anything human. The clock had opened the gate, and through it came the chronophage. Its body was like the merging of time itself, shifting, collapsing, and reforming in an endless loop of horror. It was a being beyond comprehension, a parasite on existence itself. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, burned with a hunger for all that was, all that had been, and all that would be. Nathaniel's scream was cut short as its massive form lunged toward him, its limbs impossibly long and fast. In that instant, he realized what he had always known. Deep down, he was too late. Thank you very much. See you all in the next video.